graduate students and postdocs in FHB, formerly known as CABNet. GPFHB is a vibrant network of United States Wheat, Barley, and SCAP initiative graduate students and postdocs, and it's dedicated to provide educational, career, and social opportunities for those involved in FHB research and beyond. And in the past, we have organized a variety of informative webinars covering diverse career path options, hands-on LinkedIn webinar, and more. Today, we are delighted to have Dr. Jessica Koski with us. Dr. Koski currently leads the winter wheat breeding program at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where her work focuses on developing varieties to enhance the profitability of wheat production in Illinois and beyond. She earned her bachelor's degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison and her doctorate from Cornell University. I've been following Dr. Koski's research and social media for many years now, and I always find her posts very intriguing. And she presents her research in such an engaging way that I learn something new from every post. And I remember one post that was stands out for me was she marked a weed line in the field and with a red paint, and the caption was like, "This is the closest I will get to being an artist." And I was in the field the same day, and I found that caption pretty cool. And I think everyone worked in FHB or having field aspect can correlate with us. And for our presentation today, she's going to share valuable insights on how to use social media to effectively communicate scientific research. We as GPFHB highly appreciate her taking the time to with us today. And without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Dr. Koski.
All right, thanks for the invitation and for that introduction. I don't feel like I'm really an expert on this topic. I started using social media just for fun. I think it started mostly when I right around when I started my position here at Illinois, like 2019 or 2020. And probably even more during the pandemic because there was just harder to connect with people in person. And also, starting a new position here, of course, is exciting, and there's a lot of exciting things to share. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of background of how I started, but I never really thought about it as a career or something, a career promotion or something like I was going to achieve some kind of goal. It was really just more for fun. And so that's kind of the perspective I have. And yeah, when I was in grad school, so when I started grad school 15 years ago, there was social media, obviously, but it was a lot different. People were not really using it that much for professional things, mostly just like Facebook and, things like that. And so that was not something I had ever done as a grad student or even cared about. I got my first smartphone like in the middle of grad school. So things have changed a lot since then. So sure, the way that my viewpoint or how I do things is probably going to be a lot different than the younger generation and all of you. So anyways, these are just some ideas that I wrote down off the top of my head. What do I think are important messages around social media for science? So number one, which maybe as a surprise to you, but number one, and it also sounds kind of very maybe negative, but put your phone down and do your research. That's number one. I mean, it's something that I see just too often. The phone or social media just gets really distracting to people. It's something that we struggle with a lot, in the research program, getting people to pay attention to what they're doing, being present in the research. And I don't really blame individual people. It's really that these social media apps, they have been designed to be addictive. So actually they have actually looked at, psychological patterns in your brain, and looked at psychological research and designed the apps to actually be addictive. So it's not like just oh, just saying that it's addictive. No, it actually was made, really designed for that. So I think we have to be really careful and just try not to get too carried away on and too wrapped up in what's going on in the virtual world, because you're going to miss out on anything in the real world that, and all the great content that you could be sharing is here in the real world, right? So um that's number one. And then, on top of it all, as scientists, of course, our research should be our number one priority, and being really excellent at doing that and prioritizing that is just number one. So I would just be really careful, like, as a number one thing to remember in all of this is make sure that you are staying off your phone and just using it sparing, for those rare occasions, like taking a photo of something and maybe posting it later, um, at a time when it's not interrupting your research or your attention span and things like that. And so definitely number one rule. So if anybody wants to jump in with comments or ideas, please do. But um I'll get into the second thing. So the other thing is just it also goes along with being mindful or just paying attention to what you're doing, but um in your day-to-day work or your life, or just there's always interesting details that, or something that looks beautiful, right? So just taking the time to appreciate those things around you, even if it's something um that sort of you might think is like, oh, this is just a mundane detail, or this is just a routine thing, or but there something that may be routine to you or just mundane detail to you, you is actually interesting to someone else, or or you can just find or appreciate the sort of beauty of everyday things. And so I tend to just take a lot of pictures, like especially when I'm doing field work, because there's always something interesting to look at. But I tend to take a lot of pictures, and 90%, no, way more than, say 99% will never end up in social media or in a post or anything. They're just gonna be there in my photo album, in my, just on my phone somewhere. But then, say if later on in the evening, or, sometime I'll be looking back at my photos, and I'll reflect, oh, this is maybe some other people would like to see this or be interested in that. Um, and then I'll think about sharing it. But the first thing is you just have to notice those details. You have to think about, be present in the moment and think about what you're looking at, and just appreciating if it's something that looks beautiful or interesting, and then just capturing it, and then later on maybe posting it. So and and then not letting yourself be distracted by the idea of posting something immediately. It doesn't have to be right then and there, it can be at a later time. um yeah, let's see. Yeah, and the other thing is to kind of don't be afraid to show your human side. Like, I think it's most interesting when I see, when I'm looking at other people's material, when I see like the sort of intersection between their work as a scientist and how they are as a person. Like, what kind of things are they interested in, or are they, and how it sort of interact, or how like showing their human side. It's hard to explain it, maybe what I'm trying to say, but um just putting a little bit of your own personal spin on whatever it is that you're doing, in your research, or just finding ways to let your personality through, so um and just to be a little bit more casual, maybe that's the right way of putting it, rather than, not, you don't have to have every post being some kind of a technical result, or um something informational or showing off like, oh, I published this paper, you know, not, yeah, you can have those information sharing too, and that's really nice. But it's kind of, I tend to find that people enjoy looking at things that are just more for fun. Like, but there is also some science to be learned, or it can spark somebody's interest without you actually really realizing ahead of time that that's what you were doing. And then just to put a caveat on there, as I said, you know, try to avoid negativity. Yeah, it's good to show your human side, but I think it's very easy to want to try to complain or vent out somewhere. I think, you know, social media is probably not the best place to do it. A lot of people do that. In my opinion, it's just not the best. You don't want to be putting yourself out there as a person who just complains all the time, and people get tired of hearing it too, you know, and there's just overall, I think in the world, there's just way too much negativity. So um there is obviously you know, you have to find somebody that you can talk to about things and vent out, but you know, probably just social media may not be the best place for that. And one thing I always try to um live by is, you know, when I'm posting something, putting something out there, is just to try not to put too much text. And I often catch myself sometimes putting way too much text and then realizing that actually that text isn't really necessary, because if you have a photo, you know, I don't need to be, if I have a photo of a beautiful, you know, landscape or something that I'm looking at that's really beautiful, like I don't necessarily need to say, look, this is beautiful. Like the photo is already there enough to say that. So if a photo is saying that, you know, sometimes you don't need to also have the worst exact same words expressing what's in the photo. So that's where I kind of like to use text sparingly, or to convey a different message, like a different spin on, or what's in my mind at the time that I took the picture, rather than just like describing what's in the picture. If that makes sense. Yeah, and it's also makes it a little easier too, because you're spending, you know, the less that you have to write and type in there, you know, the less time it's gonna take. And then the last thing, number 5, is to just avoid to getting too invested. What I mean by invested is if you have, you know, a lot of content, or if, let's say, social media is like is a very, very important means of disseminating your research, or and you don't really have any other ways of doing that, that can be kind of risky, because, you know, as we see, like these platforms can really take a direction unexpectedly that you have no idea, you really don't have control over the platform itself. So it if you're really invested in a platform, and then something happens and it changes and some updates are made, and you know, you may end up losing that platform. And so it's just better not to get too invested. Um, and also just to limit, you know, how much time you're spending and how much energy you're really spending on this, because, you know, you have to be focusing on doing excellent work and doing great science and getting it out there. And in my research program, we have a website that is through the university. And so that's something that, you know, we can have full control over here, you know, exactly what content, and then, you know, it has a link and it's linked back to the university. And so that's like a great thing to have, just to make sure like you have this place that, regardless of whatever platform changes or updates or whatever changes about the platforms that you're using, you know, you at least have something that's more solid, um, that is always, you can always point back to. So I think that's a nice thing to do also, just to have more control. Um, yeah. So those are the top 5 things that came to mind as I was thinking about what I wanted to say here in this webinar. And I would be really interested in hearing what kind of questions you all have. Guess we have a small enough group, I think you can just use the mics.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We open the floor to questions now. If you guys have any questions, you can put in chat or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. I don't see any question, but I have one question that I
Yes.
wanted to ask is use of jargon terms when we are putting stuff in, social media presence and stuff. I always, when I'm putting a post, I always feel like, should I use this term for a wider audience? Maybe people working in Fusarium or like I work with susceptibility factors might know it, but not others. How to deal with that kind of situation, or, I wanted
Yeah,
to be a little. Mhm.
that's a really good question. So I think so my approach to that, I'm trying to just reflect back, and I think that I typically don't use very much jargon, but with some rare exceptions. And I think that it's okay to, as a scientist, it's okay to put out some content that's going to be not understood by every single person, right? So, but some people will get it. And some people will just be maybe intrigued by it. Like, oh, I don't understand this, but this looks interesting. Like, wow, that's some really interesting work they're doing. Maybe even though they don't understand. But then kind of balancing it out with some more content that would be just not technical or just something interesting that you can see, in your work that anybody can appreciate regardless of
Yeah,
whether they know the science. Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is one question I see in the chat. I can read that for everyone. It says, how can I stay updated on research and discoveries in my area of study using social media?
Hmm. That's a good question. Like, I actually have not really tried to use social media to stay updated on research. So there probably is an opportunity to do that. Say, I know a lot of people make posts on LinkedIn or even Twitter, or I guess X now is what it's called. With things like papers and so on. But I don't see it as the greatest venue for that, because I think that just in general, like your regular search, Scholar search, Google Scholar, whatever, through your university library search, even conferences and things like that are probably still the best way to stay up to date, because you're going to be able to search easily and find, information that's targeted to what you're looking for. So, yeah, I mean, and things might change, in the future, that this might be something that changes, but I feel like right now, with the way that the platforms are set up, is probably not the best way for that. I think, occasionally you will run into some interesting research, but maybe that's not, the primary means to stay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Jessica. I have a question. So, in your opinion or view, is there a way that sometimes professors who are hiring like postdoc or graduate student go to maybe LinkedIn or social media and say, okay, let me look at what this particular student or like graduate
Mhm.
student is interested in?
Yeah, so you're sort of asking about professionally, like, do professors look at students? Should students look for opportunities through the platforms? That's basically what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I would say the answer is yes, to a certain extent. So me, I always do like, I call it sort of a rudimentary background check, right? So if somebody is applying for a position and I'm gonna, let's say, I'm considering them as a potential student or so on, I'm definitely going to look them up online, you know, maybe not Facebook or something. And I'm not going to get too intrusive, but I'll see what they're posting on LinkedIn or on X or whatever and see, is there something that I should, you know, mainly what I'm looking for are things that would be really red flags. Like, are they putting some racist content out? Is there something that is really, really alarming to, you know, that's the sort of stuff I'm looking out for. Is, you know, is this person a good person that I want to work with? So that's the kind of stuff that I typically would look for. Just to make sure, you know, you just want to be careful, you know, anybody who you bring into your orbit and around your, you know, your current people. So that's mainly what I do, you know, say like just to check people's what they're posting, you know, that's an easy way to kind of just check, get a gut feeling about somebody before you interview them or talk to them further. Yeah. So that definitely in that sense, you want to be careful what you're posting. I mean, you wouldn't want to put anything out there that would be, you know, putting you in jeopardy of not getting a job or something like that. You know, you just want to be careful. And just yeah, and then I'm sure none of you guys would be putting that stuff out there anyways, but you know, um making sure that there's nothing that could be misinterpreted maybe. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. And then as far as looking for opportunities, I I've definitely taken the approach now of you know, when I'm hiring, I'll advertise, you know, and usually through the platforms people are seeing them, you know, they get a lot of traffic. So through like LinkedIn or X and then people can apply and then I have a candidate pool and but you know, not very many professors actually do that. I think some are, it's becoming more of a trend, but and so you can try to look for things like that. But I think that it's still not the majority of professors that will do that. And so right now it's a little bit unclear as to, you know, what's the best way to, if you're a job seeker, like what's the best way to use, say, LinkedIn or X. I think that's actually a really gray area right now. I don't think there is like a lot of norms that have been established. But I think the best thing that you can do is just to make sure that whatever you're putting out there about yourself is really, you know, genuinely reflecting how you are as a person and putting kind of your best foot forward. And then, you know, make it just so that if anybody stumbles across your profile or looks you up, you know, that you're easy to find and that, you know, you're presenting yourself how you really are. So.
I have one more question in the chat from
Yeah.
Anshul Rana, and she's asking, how do you see social media influencing collaboration among plant breeders and researchers worldwide?
So influencing collaboration, that's a great question. Trying to think if I have established any collaborations due to social media. Um, so I don't think that has happened. Nothing that I can think of comes to mind, but I will say this. If you're, you know, if you make yourself known on the internet or even in, say, making presentations at conferences, it's like the more that you make yourself known to people, the more that they may think to contact you about, you know, doing some kind of research together or collaborating. And so I think that has definitely happened um, where, you know, I might have posted something and then I got some follow-up email from a reporter, a local ag reporter, you know, and so, you know, the more you put yourself out there, the more that people are aware of you, and then they'll think about contacting you when they, you know, need something. So I think, you know, that's also can be dangerous too. Not dangerous, but you could end up getting too many emails or too many contacted by too many people, say, like in the case of, people looking for graduate research assistantships and things like that. The more that you put yourself, make people aware of you, the more that you're going to be contacted. So, that can happen. I guess you just, that's how it works. So, that's
Awesome.
a good thing in the end,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions for Dr. Koski?
So I have another question. So how would you make sure like the stuff you post on like social media from maybe your research field or lab represents the interests of the university or something, so that you don't get into those copyright issues?
So I never really worried too much about that sort of thing. Of course, you do have to be careful with copyright and all those. So for example, you cannot post like a PDF of your paper with a link that everyone can download. That unless it's open access, right? But I can, it would be illegal for me to go to a journal that with an article that's behind a paywall, download the PDF and then share it to everybody, right? That's not allowed. So you have to be careful about that stuff. You can share a preprint. You can share your preprints, meaning the article in the exact, like how it looks right before it's published. You can share preprints. That is okay, but you cannot share the final PDF version unless it's already open access. So that is just something to keep in mind. Other things, other rules, I mean, I can't think of any other instances where you would have to be worried about copyright. I suppose, same goes for textbooks. You don't want to like take a picture of a textbook and just start posting it online. That's not allowed. But as far as university, as long as the photos, like if you take your own photos and you post them, there really shouldn't be any issues like with IP, so because you are the owner of that IP. Now, let me think of other instances. I guess if the university owns the photos for any reason, obviously you should probably not post that without permission. Yeah, so I don't think there is too many things to worry about. Yeah, especially if your accounts are really personal accounts, then there shouldn't be any issues there. I think at least with our university, if you want to have some kind of official account where you are like representing the university, that is a whole nother can of worms. Like you have to get some approval and you have to have some, so I think nobody really does that I know, personally. So I think most everybody should be fine, with their personal accounts, maybe photos that they're taking, and they should be fine.
And like if I have a follow-up question, like if it is my own paper, say like I published it as a first author, a shared co-author, and it is not open access. So I
Yeah.
shouldn't put the PDF of that as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So you can put
Okay.
a link to the journal, right?
Okay.
But if they have access through their institution, they'll be able to access click the link and get to the but if somebody does not have access to that journal, then
Okay.
then it can be then and I doubt that the journals are going to come after individual people for one article or two, but it's just something you obviously wouldn't want to be doing a lot of that because that could get you into trouble.
Okay, thank you.
That's something we all have to, as professors, they tell us all about these rules because in your classes, it's the same type of rules that we have to follow about, you know, making sure like I'm not supposed to print the articles and give them to students, but the students can click the links and print them themselves. You know, there's all these little rules.
Yeah.
It's kind of seems silly sometimes.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Rutkowski. I have a question.
Yes.
Since we are talking about science, and science is really like a wonderful thing. So I'm curious to know if you have like, you also think about schedule or how often you post, or is there like a thing how, you know, because I take a lot of pictures and I have a lot to share, but when is much too much or
Right.
it's less too less?
Yeah, like how much should you post? So I think generally, you know, people who have the most, you know, followers and engagements are the ones who tend to post the most. You know, the ones you see, they tend to post all the time, constantly, you know. And so there is probably a correlation between how many times you post and, you know, how many likes you get and how many followers. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. You know, I don't tend to worry about that. Like I'm not really like trying to optimize my likes or my posts, you know. My goal is to just really like put stuff out there that interests like that other people will probably enjoy. But you know, it doesn't have to be all the time. Like sometimes I'll go like a couple of months, I won't post anything, you know, so and that's there's nothing wrong with that, you know. So I don't really think there is like a maximum or a limit. Of course, if your content is just becoming annoying, people may just like unfollow you or you know, block you, right? If it's too much. If it's like really, really redundant, maybe. If it's like really the same thing over and over, then I think you may lose people. Like I've had cases where, you know, people that I followed, I ended up unfollowing them because it got too redundant, you know, and I was just kind of got a little bit tired of it. And you don't want your entire feed, you know, taken over by like one person. So yeah, I guess just try not to be too redundant, but if you really have like interesting new stuff that you want to share, I don't think there is a maximum. The one thing would be just how much time you're willing to spend, because you don't want to distract too much from your main purpose, which is doing the research and, you know, experiencing the moments that you want to experience. So yeah, and then I don't really have a schedule. You know, like some people say like if you post on Tuesday, you get more engagement or whatever, you know. Um and I think that's always kind of funny, but I think there is obviously truth to that, and like you can really analyze it and come up with that sort of recommendation. But I just whenever it's just basic for me personally, it's just whenever I feel like it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Do you see any question? If not, we will thank Dr. Rutkowski for his time and our insights, and we look forward to seeing you everyone in the in-person FHB forum event. Thank you, Dr. Rutkowski.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope this was useful to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.